Nisambula children, vinaka lebu for listening to my Talanoa today. My name is Dr. Teresi Bunindilo, and I'm part of the Talanoa with Dr. T program. Thank you so much for joining me in this Talanoa session covering the topic earthquakes. So at this time, we'd like to think of our brothers and sisters in the Kingdom of Tonga, and we're thinking of the children who are there, and let us think of them through our prayers, and we hope that we will all learn together through what they're going through, and this topic as well that affects everyone around the world. The big question that we often ask is, what is an earthquake? Earthquake in the Fijian language is une. Une. Would you like to say that word again with me? Une. Naka. I'm sure most of you have learned this word already in school, but as we all know, that earthquakes are the shaking, rolling, or sudden shock of the Earth's surface. In other words, earthquakes are ways that the Earth's natural means of releasing stress. And earthquakes, it can be felt in large areas. However, in some places, it can last only a minute or less. Some other places, it happens once, and then after that, another time it comes back on again. So I hope with this picture on the right hand side we can be able to see what happens underneath the earth. Yeah, so those are three ways of causes of earthquakes. One is strike, slip, normal, and thrust. So I'm sure as you get older you're going to be learning more about earthquakes. So I hope you will appreciate what I will be sharing with you today. So for us to understand what we've just talked about, I will go back to the topic of plate tectonics. Yeah, remember my first video that I created on the topic of plate tectonics? So remember, the tectonic plates, it's like we looking at the Earth's crust as large slabs, yeah, or large pieces of rocks that move over a liquid surface. Okay, as you can see here on this map, that blue Pacific plate, that's one of the biggest in the world. And we are learning that today because it involves many of the islands in the Pacific where we are from. The second point I want to share today is looking at mountains form and earthquakes shake at tectonic plate boundaries. So if you look at that map where each plate meets another plate, where the red line is and the blue line and the yellow line, that's where a lot of earthquakes happen. Okay, because the plates, they move against each other. Yeah, so one is pushing and one is pulling, and that's why a lot of those movements causes earthquake. And while we're learning about the plates of the earth, I know some of you have learned this already in school. So for the young ones, this is how the bottom of the earth looks like. Okay, we thank the scientists as well as artists who are able to make this simple for us to understand. Okay, so this is how the earth is divided into. So you have the inner core, the outer core, the lower mantle, upper mantle, and crust. Now the outer core, I'm sure some of you have heard this mineral called nickel, iron, and molten rock. Okay, so molten rock is associated with volcanoes, which is what I talked about in my previous video. But it's interesting, right? So where the outer core is, that's where a lot of these minerals are found. Nickel, iron, and molten rock. So let's look around the world. And this is a map that is really important for us to look at and understand where earthquakes happen. And you'll notice there's a word there called magnitude. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Magnitude is to do with the strength, right? How big an earthquake is. So when you look at this map, you can see that there's a key over here. So the ones that are kind of orange and yellow, they are not so, not so bad. Things can shake, and that's okay. But as you go down, it means that the earthquakes can get stronger. Okay, but so when you look at this map over here, can you see the colors here? Look where it's congregating. Yeah, along the ring of fire. Yeah, I talked about this in my previous video. Right, so now we understand where these earthquakes take place. So majority of this also takes place around the ring of fire, and that includes the Pacific. So this lesson is a good way for us to think of what is happening around the world, as well as the Pacific, where most of us are from, especially, including me, as I'm originally from Fiji. Now, the main question that we're going to ask as well is, what is inside an earthquake? So we know that it shakes, we know there's rolling and there's movement of the Earth's surface. So we're going to look at the numbers here. So 1, 2, and 3. So number 1, remember the plates that we talked about in the plate tectonic session? 2 plates move in different directions. Okay, so one is pushing against the other, and when that slip happens, that movement, that's an earthquake. Number 2, the slip lets out huge waves of energy that travel through the ground, and it makes it shake. Okay, that's what makes an earthquake. And number 3, there's a word called epicenter. Some of you may have heard of that word before. Okay, so the epicenter, this is a spot on Earth's surface directly above where the quake occurs on the Earth. So the shaking may be happening here and here, but the one in the middle where the original source comes from is called the epicenter. And that's where a lot of damage actually happens. So I've got other pictures here that shows the epicenter again. So the epicenter is right here, but then scientists often measure the depth all the way down here, and they also study the fault line. Yeah, so where the fault move or slip, which causes the movement, this is what you can see here. And as we are thinking of our brothers and sisters in Tonga and our neighbors in Fiji, one of the categories of volcano and earthquake is volcanic quake. Okay, so the movement on the earth that causes the shaking because the volcano is about to erupt. So as the molten rock and the magma over here is trying to escape, right? There's a lot of energy here. See, you can see there's cracks going over here on the left, and there's cracks going here on the right, and all of that movement causes shakes on the earth. Because sometimes before the volcano actually erupts, there's usually an earthquake, a big one. Sometimes a series of them that happens. Okay? Now, how do scientists record earthquakes? So there are 2 big words here that I would like you to write down in your book. One is called the seismographs and the seismogram. Okay, so this is the way the scientists record earthquakes. So the seismograph detects movement on the crust of the earth, and then it creates these wavy lines. See, can you see the lines over here? So this is called the seismogram. Now, to tell the strength of an earthquake, scientists have to use a scale. Okay, some of you may have heard the word Richter scale. So they normally measure how strong an earthquake will be. Today it's called the moment magnitude scale, or MMS. Okay, so it's still the same thing. The old word is Richter scale, but now it's called the moment magnitude scale. Now, the larger the number on the scale, the larger the earthquake. Okay, so there sometimes you don't even notice when an earthquake happens because they are below 3 and under. Okay, so this is a summary of the numbers when the scientists measure it. So we thank the website called Duxters who offer us this information. So when it's below 3, sometimes we don't really feel it. But when it's 4.0, it can shake your house. Okay, sometimes people will notice. Yeah, it's like as if a large truck was just passing by. 6.0, things can fall off the shelf. Yeah, the walls in some houses may start to crack, windows break. Yeah, and people can start to feel it, especially those near the epicenter. Remember, we're talking about the epicenter. 7.0, the weaker buildings will collapse and cracks will start to happen on bridges and on the street. 8.0, buildings and bridges start to fall and large cracks can be found on the earth. And when it's 9.0 and up, this is the big one. Whole cities can be flattened and large-scale damage. Just so you know, some facts about the earthquake in the past, that the largest earthquake ever recorded in the world was in Chile in 1960, and guess what the number was? 9.6. Okay, so it's here, so that's what happened. Yeah, 9.6. And also in Alaska in 1964, it was 9.2. Okay, so maybe as part of your homework, if you can find out what earthquakes have happened where close to where you live, and find out which number they belong to. Okay, which of these, and write it down in your book or share it in school or in your class. Okay, very interesting, right? To learn all about this. So comes back to the question, what should you do when there's an earthquake? So most of us at school have learned the earthquake drill. Okay, so it's very important that you go under a table or under some sort of protection because things may fall on your head. And schools and places of work, they have done earthquake drills. So it's very important that we learn what to do when an earthquake happens. Of course, scientists cannot predict an earthquake, but we just have to be prepared. So what should we do? These are some of the things we need to do. Okay, children, make sure you write this down. Okay, so we need a pack or essential kit that you have in the house. So you need to have dried food, water that can last you for 5 days. Make sure you have a flashlight, have some small tools that can fit into the kit, have a transistor radio, and make sure you have enough batteries to use, because these transistor radios will work on batteries, most of them, and change of clothes. Okay, so make sure you have all of this and ready to go. When an earthquake happens or any disaster happens, you just run, grab, and you go. Okay, so I hope that this video has helped all of us to appreciate what is happening around us, and we keep learning more and more. And I would like to take this time to thank you all for listening to me. And these are some of the sources that I use to get some information for all of us to share together. Thanks to the Weather Whiz Kids, also Google, National Geographic, Earth Science for Kids, and also Ducksters.com. Yeah, so I hope that you can do your own research as well and share some of this information with your friends. Thank you so much for listening, and all the very best, and look forward to talking with you again in my next video. And the next topic is on tsunami. Thank you very much. Take care now. Nisa Mwade, and warm regards from Hawaii. Bye.